All right, guys, it's another episode of Fitter Body, Stronger Mind. Me, Cameron from Theseus Body and Mind. We've got Stephen Whitney here today. Super excited about this episode. We're talking about breath, how to breathe for optimum performance, for healthier living. I'll let Steve introduce himself properly, but to give you a quick overview, he's a master breathwork instructor for Soma, very fast growing company in the breathwork space, doing all sorts of exciting stuff. I met him on a fitness journey of mine in Thailand. When I was doing a bit of yoga out there, he came in to do a bit of pranayama with us there, which I'm sure we can talk about a little bit more as well. So, Steve, why don't you introduce yourself, talk about what you're up to, and whatever else you feel like.
Right on, Cameron. Well, thank you so much for the intro, man. I really appreciate it. And yeah, I'm incredibly excited to be here. So, me, myself, I mean, it's been a wild ride. So, for the last 3 years, I lived corporate America lifestyle and had the corporate job, all the bells and whistles, and also a heavy drinking problem. So, like you were saying, you had a fitness journey, and I went on a healing journey to get out of my depression, addiction issues, my heavy weight gain that I had incorporated. And yeah, it's been a wild story. So literally now I have been able to heal all those things. I found my purpose. I found my passion, which is pranayama, breathing and breath control, and all of the different facets that can be applied to your mental health, emotional health, physical health. And that's what I teach now. So I am a coach for Soma Breath. I'm one of their master instructors, and yeah, it's just again amazing to be here, and I'm really excited to share some of the knowledge that's been passed down for millennia. It's thousands of years that's now been passed down to me, and I feel like it's my purpose to make sure that I pass this information along to others. So I'm excited to have a chat with you and anyone else that's watching. This is going to be a fun talk.
Yeah, absolutely is, man. And for all the reasons that you just listed, So, I mean, I was really excited to get you on here because for me personally, I've been a qualified fitness professional for over a decade, but I only really started paying as much attention as it deserves to things like breath work, mindfulness practices within the last few years, really. I played around with a little bit of Wim Hof breathing techniques, things like that before I met you, just before I met you, within that kind of 12 months before then. And it was always something that I was aware of. I was aware of emerging science coming out to back it up. I was aware of people doing it and reporting great, benefits, but it was just something that never came into my kind of weekly regime. Fitness was always there, but that stuff was always kind of on the back seat. And then it wasn't until I got to Thailand, I started doing the yoga, which obviously encompasses all these other things. It's kind of the way I describe it now is like the glue that kind of holds everything else together in health and fitness. You've got the breath work, you've got the mindfulness, Um, I started experiencing all these things and realizing that there's so much in this stuff, and it is ancient wisdom, but it is wisdom. There's masses of science now, modern Western science that's backing the stuff up, that's made it really interesting to even the most kind of pragmatic, non-spiritual practitioner in the Western world who's looking to increase health, increase happiness, increase performance, all that good stuff. And then as I've evolved into a performance coach rather than a fitness coach, I've realized the huge benefits that it's been able to have on the people that I've worked with, recommending different breathwork techniques, examining them more, doing more research into the science, and it's just become apparent to me how hugely important this aspect is. And I mean, I don't wish anything was different about my past ever, because I don't think that's very constructive. But it would have been nice if I'd been interested in this a bit more, a bit earlier, because it's just so hugely beneficial. So
No, I
there's
agree with what
probably
you're saying. I'm always like, man, if my parents would have only taught me this when I was a kid, I wonder where I'd be now. Not to reflect on the past, but no, I share that with you. It's funny.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm sure there's quite a few people who will be listening to this who probably aren't practicing any kind of breath work already, who've never really paid any more attention to their breathing than just, as much as the majority of us do, which is just making sure it's happening.
Right.
So So maybe we can start off by talking a little bit about specifically what Soma is, what the practices involve, maybe what makes it different to some of the other stuff that people might have heard of. Just to give an idea of what you're actually kind of doing. 'Cause when people hear the term breath work, I think they really quite often have no idea what that entails.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and some reasons why, and that's because pranayama has been really altered and in a lot of ways Americanized. And when you start to dilute the solution, you water it down. The more you water it down, it loses its original authenticity and its core purpose. And this is the really cool thing about Soma and why I resonated with them so very much is because there is science backing on all of it. And the founder is quite amazing. He was a pharmacist, and so he has a chemistry degree, and he loves science. And I didn't grow up having any interest in science, but when I started to dive into pranayama and was able to correlate the mystic side of things with the new age modern science and merge the two together, that brought a deeper why. This magical word, and guys, this word is something I use a lot because if you're ever lost or confused, you feel like you're stuck, you can always return back to this one simple word and why. And if you have a why, then it's really going to help you out in your life. But for me, I was lost, I was depressed, I was actually borderline suicidal, and I needed to have some form of why. And so it was really cool to get the mystic side, the ancient text in the Rig Veda, the most ancient manuscript, to hear how they spoke of Soma as a different form of something outside of pranayama, but then also to take what modern day science has done and merge the two together. And it's amazing how the ancient rishis knew how to use their breathing and breath control to reach ecstatic states, to optimize their physiology, their mental health, to be able to reach expanded, altered states of consciousness where they were gaining wisdom and knowledge. And when you tap into pranayama or your prana, which is your life force energy, your breath is your life force. Without breath, there is no life. And so we have overlooked a lot of the importance of having conscious awareness of breath. And this is the really cool thing about Soma, and what differentiates it from any other modality is the technique itself, which I can talk about here momentarily, but also that it's teaching you why. Why is it that this happens when you breathe in through your nose? Why is it that this happens when you change this rhythm of breathing, when you hold your breath in or out? And breath, you find that there's a different series of actions and reactions that you can actually create to your biochemistry, your neurology, your physiology. And this to me was the ultimate biohacking tool. But again, in a lot of modalities, they just tell you this is going to detox your lymphatic system. This is going to cleanse your kidneys. Why?
Yeah.
And no one has anything to back it. And so Soma has spent many years putting together this information to bridge the gap between mysticism and modern day science. And that is really what differentiates the kind of the mission or the overlooking circle in what I see as a differentiator between Soma and other breathwork modalities, excluding the actual technique itself. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's a big problem with this stuff is that, I mean, firstly, I like what you say about having a why, and I sort of translate that same principle almost into various different things. Looks like Gaz is going to pop into the meeting with us. Perfect. Hi, Gaz. Thanks for joining. So yeah, I like that point about asking the why, and I like to translate that as well to why we dismiss things, because what I've come to realise is that we quite often just mug this stuff off a lot of the time because it's unfamiliar. We're quite scared of things that are unfamiliar, especially when it's sort of dressed up in quite flowery ancient language that we also don't really understand, and the more pragmatic kind of Western side of culture tends to turn a blind eye to those things. Don't want to be seen as doing something that's kind of weird. Don't want to be made to look an idiot by participating in something you don't really understand. And so it is quite important to be able to translate to somebody, the actual kind of hard facts about why this helps. And that is a problem, like I was kind of coming on to say, that when you go to sort of yoga even, or various different things, quite often the practitioners themselves don't really understand the science behind it. It's just, they're running off pure belief and the fact that they participated in it and received the benefits. But until that point where somebody has had that opportunity to receive the benefits and see the outcomes, you need to give them that little reassurance to say, look, this does actually work. It is thousands of years old, and it is, it does sound kind of funny. It does have funny names, but also there's a randomized controlled trial here that shows such and such an outcome. So,
Right.
you know, and I think that's fair enough for people to kind of require that knowledge to make that step across the kind of gap of unfamiliarity, in order to kind of give these things a go in the first place. So it's really, yeah, it's really important that you're able to
Well,
back this stuff up.
and think about how many things, not just breathing, but like how many things, I hate to say the topics, but that have been that are dogmatic. They have been adjusted.
Mm,
People have put their own twist on it. The origins of a lot of religion, knowledge,
mm,
information has all become dogmatic. And so people have twisted it and altered it. And because of this, it's actually pushed a lot of people away because they don't believe it. It doesn't make sense. They don't believe it. It's too crazy. But again, it's that watering down effect. And so again, having bridging that gap between the two, I think, is crucial because people need to know this information, but they don't need to be afraid of it. And that's one thing that Soma's done is they've removed the dogma. This is just the raw stuff here, but they also we provide you with the information of what the ancients were saying, what they were doing, but now how modern day. So it's not about one or the other. Not one is right, one is wrong. As human beings, I feel like we deserve to know all the information, and you, as a human being, anyone watching this, can, gather your own opinion or belief from that.
yeah, great point. Yeah, and that's almost the flip side of it as well, is that we also have got to a point in modern science, I think, where we're really dismissive of sort of observational research, historical research. We're always looking. We've considered the randomized controlled trial now to be the gold standard of scientific study, and so we kind of mug off everything else. Even though, if you look at the historical data, we're probably one of the first huge populations throughout history that do not practice on a mass scale some kind of conscious breathing exercise as part of our culture. So actually, when you look back and go, well, actually, all these past civilizations, all these populations in more kind of indigenous areas still like we're always practicing this, we're always doing this. There's got to be something in that. But yeah, again, because it becomes unfamiliar, it falls out of sync with cultural tradition, we tend to kind of mug it off. If we can't see a randomized control trial, it doesn't count. Yeah, so
Right.
yeah,
Right.
all interesting. Could you maybe give us an example, Steve, of the kind of practices that you actually teach through Soma? Kind of what sort of techniques would you get people started with there, and are they wide ranging, or is it tend to be a particular set of techniques that you stick to?
It really, really ranges, and it's hard for me to say one or the other because I'm a firm believer that if I tell you this one thing is going to work, then I'm not doing you any justice. It's a lie. Not one diet works for everyone. Not one fitness routine works for everyone. Same thing. It depends on where that person's at. If they're heavily stressed out and they're dealing with adrenal fatigue and burnout, then there's a much different breathing technique that I'm going to use for that person because it's all about bringing the physiology back into alignment. And so, anytime that you're dealing with anything that is disrupting your peak performance, so whether it's your sleep, your mental clarity, your health, if you're having disease in the body, most all diseases that are generated and created in the body are just coming from an imbalance to the physiology. And the mind and the body are connected. So it's not just the body, it's also the mind and the body and the mind and body connection. So it really depends on each person. But one thing that I find to be incredibly important for absolutely every single person is to be conscious of your daily breathing. And there is a big misconception when people think of breathing. You hear from everyone that you need to breathe more. Breathe deep, breathe more. Oxygen is going to keep you alive. And it's actually quite the opposite. Yes, don't get me wrong, you do need oxygen to live, right? But it's quite the opposite in regards that in pranayama, the less you breathe, the longer you live. So it's about slowing down your breath, having breath control, because oxygen is actually the silent killer to your cells. This is what creates oxidative stress, respiratory alkalosis. This is the deterioration of your cellular structure due to an abundance, an increase in too much oxygen. Oxygen creates contraction. Carbon dioxide creates expansion. It's literally that easy. Inhale, contract, exhale, expand. And so, anyone that's listening, and just to start, is to extend your exhale. Make your exhale longer than your inhale. That's one of the best things that I can tell anyone, regardless of what state you're in. Whether you're into fitness, you're dealing with fatigue, sleep issues, mental clarity problems, brain fog, it doesn't matter. Extending your exhale is crucial to balancing CO2 levels, and that's how you use oxygen efficiently. And we really want to focus. And the big thing that I try and bring awareness to and what I teach is all about oxygen efficiency. It's about becoming efficient in how you produce energy, and oxygen equals energy. So your oxygen intake is crucial to your health and your longevity. The other component on this, though, that you guys need to be aware of is breathing in a rhythm is another crucial component. So erratic breathing leads to erratic thoughts. Erratic thoughts lead to erratic emotions, and your emotional state is basically how you view and perceive the world around you. So breathing in a rhythm will allow your physiology and your biochemistry, everything to be in rhythm. Okay, when your breath is in rhythm, then so are all of the rhythms in your body. Your entire body works off of rhythms, just like nature works off of rhythms. Our body works off of rhythms. So breathing in a rhythm. So this would be like, for example, breathing in for a count of two, in, two, and out for a count of four. This is a perfect way to become parasympathetic, to relax, to slow down the rate of oxygen you're inhaling, and start to increase the CO2 in your bloodstream. And this has a cascade of amazing health effects. So in for two,
Interesting. Yeah.
four, in, two, out, two, three, four, in through the nose and out through the mouth, or in through the nose and
Mm.
out through the nose. That's fine as well.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Very interesting. So, yeah, that's very common, not so much a misnomer, but not necessarily kind of the totally accurate perception of the truth that you're talking about there with yeah, everybody's got this idea that we're just trying to get in more oxygen, but actually breathing is as much about removing carbon dioxide from the body. Carbon dioxide also plays a huge role. Carbon dioxide gets this really bad rap for being kind of like the thing that we just really don't want because we're breathing it out, but carbon dioxide is still critical to many bodily functions. People don't realize that it does play a role. And I've noticed that there's companies that are bringing out carbon dioxide generators now to keep in the home to use strategically. I'm not sure exactly what their marketing
Wait a
angle
minute,
is,
wait a
but I
minute.
just
This isn't
yeah,
like plugging a hose into an exhaust pipe and putting it in your house and
yeah,
running the
yeah,
generator. Guys, anyone listening to this, do
yeah.
not do that. That's carbon monoxide, okay? Oh my
Yeah,
God,
yeah,
oh my
yeah, yeah. We definitely avoid the confusion there.
God. Anyway, that's funny. Go ahead.
Yeah, that was pretty much it. I like the point that you said there that it's not just about bringing oxygen in. It's not just about the oxygen factor. It's about managing the carbon dioxide, managing the body's response to it. You know, the amounts that are present and this kind of stuff. I'm sure Gaz be interested to add some stuff into the mix on that leading up being.
It was just, the immediate thing that comes to mind there is part of the mechanisms of fatigue when you train hard. When people lose their breath, in that instance, when you're breathing heavy, most of it isn't about getting oxygen in. It's actually about getting the waste products out. The up, when you're really fatigued. So not how can I put it, to confuse people and be contrarian. Obviously there is a balance, but normally that balance, if you start doing anything that's hard and anaerobic, your willingness to breathe heavy is actually more about getting carbon dioxide out, as much as it is, getting oxygen in, and more so, in fact, because especially in anaerobic activity, it builds up very, 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 very quickly. And in terms of that metabolic process, get that out to keep going. Most of fatigue is based around, to not go in too heavy, because potentially we're not going to use waste products. It's about getting waste products out, buffering waste products. So just in saying that, talking about your mental state and perceptions, even a simple logical perception of what is going on, will often change how you physiologically react to something. So say, for example, if I'm training physically hard and my perception is I need to get more oxygen in, it will probably ever so slightly and subtly change the rhythm in which you are breathing, because you're focused on getting something in. Whereas if you focus on getting something out, even if you're unaware of it, you will actually start moving and thinking and breathing differently, if that makes sense. And so, if you understand that process, for me, my breathwork experience has actually been limited to the practice of freediving. But I also have a degree in physiology, and I understand that every time I respire and expire, it's a bit like what goes up must come down. If something goes up, there's a point where it almost imperceptibly stops and then comes down again. And that, for me, is the gaseous exchange. That's the exchange of gases across the membrane of the lungs and into the bloodstream. Knowing that, I've caught myself, without even consciously thinking about it, as I breathe, I almost pause and I let myself, I don't have an active release. I don't push anything out. I pause and almost let the weight of gravity let it come out. And for me, in my mind, that's giving my body that chance to have that gaseous exchange, to get, to extract oxygen from the air I breathe in and allow that carbon dioxide to dissolve, across those membranes and
This
come
is
out.
interesting that you're saying this, because with your background, yes, you're focusing on releasing the gases, but as you take that oxygen in, that brief period of pause that you're speaking of, that you're then allowing that gas to leave, right? Well, I actually believe in the opposite. Not believe, the research that I've done is the opposite. Carbon dioxide is the activant that releases oxygen off the red blood cell. When the hemoglobin attaches the oxygen to the red blood cell, it will not release off that red blood cell without proper CO2 levels. So if you're constantly breathing out all of these gases, then you're missing out on a crucial component to health. And that's actually allowing the oxygen to release off the red blood cell and enter into the other cells, the other organs, muscles, and tissues. And you can't do that without proper carbon dioxide levels. So if you guys are shallow breathing or breathing too much, especially in fitness, you're breathing out all the gases, but that means that you don't have proper CO2 levels in your bloodstream. And this is what creates oxidative stress and fatigue. This is what creates fatigue.
Yeah. Maybe I didn't.
Are we on this? Maybe
Clear.
I misinterpreted what you were saying.
Yeah. So like, for example, I know from physiology that the stimuli for me to breathe is actually caused essentially by the presence of carbon dioxide, as opposed to, so for example, if I was to do lots of hyperventilating, I would become dizzy. I would become over oxygenated. And to bring my normal breathing rhythm back, I would actually have to pause, get that stimuli from the chemoreceptors wherever in my brain, speaking to my understanding my O2 CO2 mix in my blood, and it's the fact that CO2 is present that will stimulate me to want to breathe, to breathe heavier. So I was trying basically say the same thing, but it's obviously come across wrong.
No, brother, it's cool. It's a really complex topic, really, and I love what you just said, because this is another huge misconception, and that I feel like it's important for people to know. So another really important thing in pranayama is actually holding your breath consciously. Doing it unconsciously has negative effects, but consciously. But when you remove all the air from your lungs, a full exhale, okay, all the oxygen you remove and you hold, well, you're going to get this urge to breathe, this panic sensation. And it's not a lack of oxygen that makes you want to have to breathe again. It's actually a buildup of CO2 levels. CO2 triggers the nervous system to want to have to breathe. And so this is interesting that you said that, because that buildup of CO2, that's what's making you want to have to breathe. So again, just bringing awareness to these little things and how they actually trigger the body to have these responses is quite an interesting thing. I think it's important for people to know in any facet of their life, whether fitness or emotional health, you know? So I think it was really, really spot on that you said that.
Well, one of the things I find really fascinating, sort of just to add to, I'd love to get your thoughts on it, is the mammalian dive reflex. I don't know if you're familiar with this.
I'm sorry, say that again?
The mammalian dive reflex. So when you enter different pressure zones, if you were to go down underwater, humans have the mammalian dive reflex, and you will find the deeper you go down, the less of an urge. Basically, the longer you can hold your breath, because say at sea level, your lungs are, sorry, I'm trying to fit it in the camera, of X volume. But as the pressure comes on, they actually come down. And there's this strange and curious reflex whereby the deeper you go, essentially the less out of breath you feel. So it's almost, you can hold your breath for longer the deeper down you are. And as you start to come up, you often get to, I don't want to, not the experts in this, I think it's 7 meters. 7 meters is known as the blackout zone. And I think it's normally around sort of 12 meters where things start to change. So you'll find you feel fine, you feel fine, you feel fine. You start coming up and suddenly you feel out of breath. And you've got these last few meters to go. I've always been curious. It sounds like you may or may not have the answer as to what's actually happening at that point.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly can't give you a heavily educated answer. I really, really can't. Just off the top of my head, I'm curious if it has something to do with pressure. So like, as you were saying, the farther you go down, the more pressure, there you go. The more pressure that's being put on. Well, bringing the sponge, okay? And so oxygen is then being absorbed into your lungs, right? You go, you hold your breath, you go down, and as you squeeze, that oxygen is being pushed. So what you're doing is you're pushing that oxygen into the other parts of the body, and that oxygen is what's making it thrive. It has the nutrients that it needs. And then as you come up, what happens is there's no more oxygen in your bloodstream, and now there's this trigger to breathe. But to be honest, I really don't know. This is just me kind of shooting off on a whim. And actually, I'm surprised I don't, because I have a scuba diving background. And that's an interesting question. I'll have to look into this, man.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. It looks like none of us know the answer, so we definitely need to do our homework. But
creative question.
Yeah, that is a really interesting question. I mean, I'm glad you brought up free diving though, Gaz, because that's that's a great, or diving in general. I mean, that's a great example of where this would obviously benefit physical recreation or sports recreation, and I think a lot of the science has come out of free diving. You've got a guy called James Nestor who's just written a book recently called Breathe. I think it's just called Breathe. You've probably heard of him, Steve. Yeah, and so he's actually a journalist, but he's also a free diver. So his background was, I think he was running freediving courses. I don't want to tell inaccurate stories now, but yeah, he's a lot of the science that. So I mean, that's his natural evolution. He's gone from free diving into, okay, so breath is obviously super important for various different things, because obviously part of free diving as well isn't just how much air you can fit in your lungs or how well you can deal with that carbon dioxide buildup, but it's also about staying calm, as you put it absolutely appropriately, Stephen. It's oxygen efficiency as much as anything, and maintaining that mental state where you're able to stay relaxed, and not allow the body to work any harder than it needs to, is a massive part of that. So free diving is kind of huge about the breath control sides of things for the physiological responses to that, but then also the mindfulness and everything that goes hand in hand with that as well. And anyway, this guy James Nestor, he's kind of traveled the world interviewing all these different, immersing himself in these different cultures, ancient cultures that practice all these different things, and then he's come back and written a book about them all, which is really interesting. But the point I was going on to is it's an interesting panel we have here, because Gaz has almost undoubtedly got his sportsman's head fully engaged in this conversation. I'm kind of somewhere in between that and kind of cognition, cognitive function, like how we can use it to learn and focus at work. And I'm interested to hear from you, Steve, because the benefits are, numerous, and there's loads of them. And if you go onto the Soma website and talk about all the things that it claims that this can have an advantage on for you, the list is pretty long. But I'm interested to know what the kind of main things are that you end up dealing with clients that come to you, Soma, or with clients that come to you privately. Is it sports performance? Is it stress? Is it learning? Kind of is there a general typical theme that people are hoping to use it for?
Yeah, and actually it's funny because I can tie this into free diving as well. And because actually the components on how, now I don't know about you, on how you trained in free diving, but the way that I have seen free divers train with breath control, the process is the same for anyone, regardless if you're a free diver or you're a secretary at a corporate company. It's the same thing. So what you're doing is you're overriding your nervous system. You're building up strength to your nervous system. So regardless, I get people that have adrenal fatigue, a lot of people that are dealing with burnout. And a lot of my focus in my work is stress. Breathe with Steve, which is my website and my business. It focuses primarily on stress and how to biohack your nervous system. So, and with Soma, I teach their mentoring program, their coaching program, because I know the techniques and the science behind it so well that I teach them how to embody their gifts, their strengths, and be able to teach this kind of thing to others. So the diversity is huge. You got people that are dealing with fitness and peak performance, people that are dealing with traumatic experiences, people that have dealt with, again, burnout, horrible bad relationships, injuries, dealing with health conditions, chronic autoimmune diseases, all of which are coming to receive guidance, because again, the research that's now coming out is just profound. But the way that I can tie this together is there is it's called Nishisha Rishaka Kumbhaka, okay? And this is breath retention. This is a Sanskrit word, Indian Sanskrit word for breath retention. Nishisha Rishaka Kumbhaka, okay? This is holding your breath out, and it's holding your breath out past the comfort zone. So that's the Nishisha, okay? Rishaka Kumbhaka is just holding your breath out. But then there's this urge to breathe, okay? This panic sensation, which again we talked about, is actually not a lack of oxygen, but a buildup of CO2. Anyway, what happens is you trigger your nervous system. The nervous system, because I want you guys all to think about this. When have you ever consciously, on purpose, held all of your breath out? It's just not common unless you are training in free diving or pranayama. But for me, I spent 30 years of my life, and I don't think I'd ever held my breath out. I've held it in when I'm swimming, when you're playing games to see who can do it the longest between your friends, whatever. But when you hold your breath out, that trigger response that activates your nervous system, okay? And this feeling of, oh my God, I have to breathe. It's a panic sensation. So the Nishisha Rishaka Kumbhaka is overriding that urge to breathe. Okay. And when you do that, your physiology starts to change. Your blood vessels dilate. You start to produce more red blood cells. And what you do is you build up a strength to your nervous system. So it's really, really hard to build up resilience and strength to your nervous system. But one way to do it is your breath, because your breath directly influences all the functions in your mind and your body, and more precisely, your nervous system. So each time that you train in holding your breath out, you're building up a resilience to that response, that panic sensation. Okay. That's why these free divers are able to withhold that panic sensation and be able to override the thoughts, because the thought sends a signal to the body. It said, our diaphragm stopped moving, you stopped breathing, red flag, what the hell is going on here? And the body starts to freak out. And same thing if you're in a sauna, the heat, eventually you're going to start to panic and you want out. But it's just the mind sending a signal to the body, because the nervous system is weak. It's overreacting. Okay. So the more you can train in holding your breath out and triggering that response to your nervous system, and then you override that response, you hold it just a little bit farther. Each time you do it, it's I literally say it's like taking your nervous system to the gym. Okay. Because again, you go to the gym, you lift weights. The next time you throw 2.5 pounds on, you lift some more, or you increase the amount of reps or whatever it might be, and you build up strength. Same thing applies to your nervous system when you use pranayama, or more, Nishishara Shaka Kumbhaka. And so this is overriding that signal that's being sent from the brain to the body. So again, whether it's a free diver that needs to stay very, very cognitive and very calm and relaxed under great pressure and very stressful environments, one way to do that is to build up a strength by holding your breath out. Okay, Mary Sue at her desk at the corporate job that's dealing with her boss yelling at her, and she's got stacks of paperwork and all this stuff. That is the same stress response as the person freediving, because stress is not real, it's a response. I can't, if I were to ask you to go get me a bucket of stress, could you? No, because it's not a tangible thing. You could tell me you could go put your boss in a bucket and bring your boss to me, but like good one, but it doesn't quite apply. It's a response. So whether or not you're sitting at a desk and your boss is yelling at you, or you're 7 meters underwater, you're dealing with a stress response. The important thing is that we gain resilience and strength and override that stress response, because that stress response is what keeps us in our little glass box, in our comfort zone. And when we can expand out of that, that's where we tap into peak performance, more possibilities, capabilities of what truly lies within inside of ourselves. So when Mary Sue at her desk is training in pranayama and holding her breath out and training her nervous system, when boss slams a huge stack of paperwork, gives her a at her for it, it's not a big deal, because her brain is conditioned to override that initial response, that stress response. And her physiology is also built it up. So now she's connected the mind and the body, and she's built up a strength to that situation. This is one of the biggest things that I see with people that come in, is that they build up a resilience to stress and stressful situations. And when you learn that stress is actually everywhere in anything, and it's not real, it's a response, and you can override it, then this changes the demographic completely. So really, the people that are coming into Soma, let me tie this all back around, regardless if they're dealing with healing conditions, chronic disease, chronic pain, if they're dealing with wanting to reach peak performance, emotional pains, traumatic experiences in their life, depression, anxiety, all of it can be strengthened and brought back to balance by forms of pranayama like this. So it's diverse in that way. Now, how I present that routine is going to be different for each person, but overall, this is one of the most important things to your health and your well-being. And I haven't even touched the surface of how amazing this stuff is and how it affects your physiology. But this is a really, really powerful breathing method that I highly recommend people do.
Yeah, well, a lot of what you're saying really resonates, actually. Number one, I'm very into the science of stress. Big fan of
yes,
so the ulcers and all the rest of it. Just before we've got to go to that element of conversation, Recently, because I've had a knee injury, I have been just kind of conscious about using my transverse abdominis, that lateral band of muscle. And if I were to just, I've not been practicing breath work that much lately, but if I was to just breathe, get in a parasympathetic zone, focus on holding breath in, I could probably sort of lay down and hold my breath for over 4 minutes or something like that. I've been doing stomach vacuums and focused on basically tensing my transverse abdominis. And it's shocking. I'd probably go about 15 seconds. And just that difference. And it's a very different intake of breath I take afterwards. So if I was to hold my breath in afterwards, I very calmly breathe in. When I do the stomach vacuum and focus on flexing that TVA and then maybe playing around my abs, the breath in it almost surprises me the level of panic that's there.
Yeah.
Like being given the old,
the shock.
Gadunk.
Yeah.
It surprises me when it comes in. And I mean, I'm talking about this, I've been doing this a matter of days now, probably less than a week. But what you were saying, the difference between my perceived level of physiological stress from keeping the breath out as opposed to breathing it in is totally different. It's worlds and worlds and worlds apart. And it is something that is very interesting, because I always feel understanding the stress response, that it would be something I would innately have decent control of. But it was new and different, and it got me.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, and this is actually really cool. This is a little tidbit that anyone watching this can use. There's a couple of ways that you can gauge not only your health, but also your oxygen efficiency levels, how well and efficient you are at using oxygen. Because if you're not, you're putting stress on the cells, on your mitochondria, the whole 9 yards, and it can be very damaging. But one way to tell is all you do is breathe all of the air out and hold. So actually, let's all do it right now. So just just remove all the air from your lungs. One thing you can do is make a s sound at the end. If you do a s sound at the end until you can't do that anymore, that's going to help remove any remaining air that's stored in your esophagus. So do it and see how long you can hold your breath. Okay, so everyone just try it right now. You just observe. Exactly. You just observe this. So this is the interesting thing. If you are at about 10 seconds to 15 seconds is pretty normal, but it's weak oxygen efficiency. If you can do that for 30 seconds, then you have good oxygen efficiency. 45 seconds and up, and you're rocking it. You're rocking it. Now in Soma, we teach you how to prime the body to hold your breath out for longer, for like 2 minutes. And when you train in this long enough, you hold your breath out for 2 minutes. But one way to gauge your oxygen efficiency is if you can hold your breath out without anything else for 30 seconds or more, you're doing good. Anything less than that, and you need to train in more pranayama. Another one is how long you can hold your exhale. So like a tone. So you take a deep breath in. And you just hold that as long as you can. And the longer you can hold that, the more efficient you are at using oxygen, because you're removing that air slowly. And when the body is used to, adapts to having less oxygen, it adapts to using oxygen more efficiently. So those are just two little tidbits that people can use to gauge your oxygen efficiency level and also your overall health in your body. Little tidbit.
Yeah, that's awesome, Steve. I love stuff that people can obviously just try straight away at home and start gauging their own kind of level where they're at with this. Essentially, what we did the first time there is similar to the Bolt test, isn't it? Whereby you would actually be looking for that first initial panic response, aren't you? With the Bolt test, you're not timing the length of time that you can hold the breath out before you need to breathe. You're timing the time between the full exhalation and then that first. It's like the diaphragmatic spasm, isn't it? Like the panic response to want to breathe again. But I haven't heard of the measuring of the tone. That's quite interesting. Is that a soma thing, or is that something that's? Yeah. Okay. Cool.
We focus a lot on toning because that has profound effects on your vagus nerve, and your vagus nerve runs through all the organs. So it's a great way to become very parasympathetic. And it sends just a soothing vibration to your mind, your midbrain, your body, physiology. It's quite amazing. And guys, also keep in mind, don't judge yourself on how long you can hold your breath. Remember, you don't usually do this unless you train in it. So don't be surprised if it's 10 seconds. Also remember that a lot of it has to do with your environment. So us three sitting here, in a very kind of nervous, excited type of environment, we're already sympathetic. And so holding your breath out in this type of environment is going to be more challenging than it is if you're lying down on your bed in your bedroom with soft music playing and you just try holding your breath out. So try not to be too hard on yourself. Remember, your environment has a lot to do with this as well.
I think that's a great juncture to go into a little bit of kind of why, or the main benefit for me personally of why we're doing this in the first place, because no one practice is a panacea for everything, but breath work almost is, because it's going to benefit you on some level. It's breath control exercise. We know the people at home won't necessarily know, but I've seen studies that have showed benefits for sleep, benefits for relaxation, benefits for sports performance. So almost whatever it is you're interested in improving, some kind of breathwork practice is going to benefit you. But one of the best things for me to use this as a tool set is switching between those two states of nervous system. So the autonomic nervous system, as you mentioned there, one side of it is that sympathetic nervous system where we're in this state of high alert, this state of readiness, fight or flight. Fight or flight being probably the most common term that people use associated with that. And then obviously the other side of that is the parasympathetic nervous system, as you alluded to. When we're laying in bed, we're nice and relaxed, we're with our friends, we're chilled. Then we're in that state of rest, that state of relaxation. And essentially, what is typically happening with these breathwork practices is that we are initiating the parasympathetic state, aren't we? So it's a great tool set to switch from that state of high alert to that state of relaxation. And I've heard it being kind of quoted by many of the kind of influencers in this space as being the single most effective tool for daily use that you can use to do that. And that's the great thing, is that we're breathing anyway. So, in terms of tool sets that you can use literally at the drop of a hat within any environment, to just take a couple of minutes to be consciously aware of your breath and to do something a little bit different with it, as you're talking about, in line with kind of soma and many of the other practices, prolonging that exhale. I mean, that's something that you can do anywhere. If you're at work, if you're Sally at work having her boss screaming at her, you can stop for 2 minutes and you can do that. If you're in a social environment, let's say you're a socially anxious person, you're in a new environment and you feel that stress response starting to kick in, you can take yourself away. You can do it while you're in conversation. You can pay attention to your breath and you can use it as that tool set to move between these two states. And then great, that's what I love about the tone, measuring the tone, marrying it up with that vibration. One of the reasons why, hope you'll agree with me on this, Steve. One of the reasons why the breath is helping us to engage that parasympathetic nervous system is because it's stimulating the vagus nerve, isn't it? So the vibration also helps with that. The vibration ties in with that. And again, another reason why we're finding out now, or within the last however many years, that these yogis actually are they're onto something with the chanting, the mantras, because it's the actual vibration itself. It's not the magic in the words. It's not the I mean, it could be, but it's not necessarily crazy voodoo, energy streams going on around us or whatever. It's the vibration that's triggering that relaxatory response that we have when the vagus nerve kicks in, and all of that good stuff. So yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the sympathetic nervous system there, and opportunity to give a quick explanation of kind of what's really going on there.
Yeah, man. Spot on.
So again, like bite-sized things that people can take away with them. Have you got some good tips for people that are not doing any kind of breath work already to get kind of started in this space?
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing before we go into this too, what you said was really, really spot on. One of the best ways you can become parasympathetic is to breathe. But I want you guys to know that you can handle both. So your breath can increase and actually bring you to be very sympathetic to the point that it's dangerous. This is generally why people are becoming ill and having sickness, is because they are so dominant with their sympathetic nervous system that the body becomes fatigued, immune system becomes weakened, the cells start to break down, and now you're susceptible to disease. So a lot of breathing methods, I know I'm going to make a bold statement here, but like rebirthing, holotropic breathing, if you do not know the foundations of pranayama and the proper way to breathe, those methods are teaching you the incorrect way to breathe. It's fine for a session, for a ceremony every once in a while. When we talk about pranayama, we're talking about daily breathing and breathing practices that are going to optimize your health and your well-being. So guys, don't think that just by breathing, you're becoming parasympathetic. I just want to make sure there's a lot of clarity in that. Incorrect breathing is very, very dangerous to your health. It very much is. So it's actually about becoming less sympathetic and more parasympathetic, or the balance between, or the conscious awareness that you are sympathetic and that's okay in that time, but then you allow yourself to restore. You bring balance back, homeostasis back to the body. And this is allowed when you become parasympathetic, which you can do through your breathing. So I just want to bring a little bit of clarity on that because it's very, very important. A lot of people have traumatic experiences from certain breathing modalities and techniques, and it's because it literally fries your nervous system and creates such a contraction that people have these big releases. So I want you guys to understand that's not necessarily all of what pranayama is. There's much more to it, and there's much more diversity in it. So I like to try and break some of those stigmas that I've seen from a lot of people that have been traumatized through other modalities. So anyway,
okay, awesome.
Yeah. So one way to start, really, there is this beautiful combination that is going to be so beneficial for basically anyone and where they stand. This is just an entry level, amazing way to start. And it's what we call the daily dose. Okay. This is a daily routine that you can use that is going to bring you into elevated states of health. 100%. And we just did a recent science study. If you guys want to hear about it at all, let me know. But it was amazing. We brought people in and had all of them do 20 minutes. That's it. The daily dose is a 20-minute breathwork meditation. And each person had profound effects because they hooked them up to a brain scanner and they were checking their brain waves and the brain activity. And it was outstanding, the results. Absolutely outstanding. But anyway, that is what I would recommend is people start with that. And what this is a period of time that you're going to do rhythmic breathing. So like I talked about at the very beginning, in through the nose, out through the mouth, and you're breathing in a rhythm. So in for 2, out for 4. This is going to be more calming. Or in for 4, out for 4. This is going to create what's called coherence. This is a really good optimization of your physiology is when you're coherent. And so what you do is you do about 5 minutes of rhythmic breathing. So and after 5 minutes, then what you do is you remove all the air from your lungs. So like we did, okay? But what we've done is we've created a harmonization in the body. So that helps us to hold our breath out for longer. I won't go deep into that because there's a lot of different rhythms that have different effects. But basically, after your rhythmic breathing, you then hold your breath out. You hold your breath out for as long as you possibly can. You override that urge to breathe, and then you hold your breath in. You take a deep breath in, and hold. And you use your pelvic floor muscle. And what happens is through this, you rise up this energy. And again, there's a cascade of health effects that are generated from this practice. That is 1 round. A daily dose is 2 rounds of that. Again, 20-minute breathwork meditation. This is a phenomenal way to get back into a peak state of health. Actually, there's one of the co-founders of Soma. His father has a very rare muscle deterioration disease, and it took him into his 50s to figure out, the doctors to figure out what it really was. And you'll have to excuse me, I don't remember the scientific name of it or the diagnosis, but nothing was working. And they said, look, you're just going to wither away. You're going to wither away and you're going to die. So he had nothing left to lose. So he started doing his son. His son is the co-founder of Soma, and this is his father. So he got his father to start doing just the daily dose breathwork meditation. Well, literally in 6 months, he went back to the doctor, and the doctor said, we cannot believe it, but your muscles are actually doing the opposite. They're regenerating themselves. They're rebuilding. And the thing is, they figured this out because his father couldn't hold his son's 1-year-old child. He couldn't pick him up. He was so weak. And after 6 months of doing this, they went to go visit their dad. And sure enough, dad grabbed the son and was holding him up and, swinging him and all this beautiful stuff. And they went, oh my God. And even the dad was like, oh, I can't believe it. So that's when he went to the doctor and found out his muscles are actually coming back. So this is just one small example. I have a laundry list of them. But I highly, highly recommend that you guys get on a daily pranayama, soma breath breathing routine, doing the daily dose. And if you guys want, I have a really cool masterclass that talks about stress, the effects of breathing on stress. And it also has a daily dose breathwork meditation at the end of the masterclass that you guys can have for free, or anyone that's watching this. It's my gift from me to you.
That's awesome. Yeah, I really appreciate that, Steve. And any resources that you've got, any references? Because I know that the guys in our tribe like to brush up on a bit of the science and stuff as well. So any references that you've got to stuff that either Soma is doing or that just backs up, any of what you said, feel free to send that over to me, and I'll add those to the notes and things as well.
Tons.
So yeah, mate, it's amazing how fast an hour goes by. We haven't even really begun to dig deep. But this has been amazing.
Office, I've got tons of questions.
I really like these questions, man. We might have to, you go for your question if you want. We might have to open up a round 2, like a second. We might need to do a series on this, because I think with your guys' knowledge and me bringing a very interesting topic together, we might be able to go really deep on this and people might enjoy it. So, but what was your question, brother?
It was more an observation. I was thinking in terms of life, what both of you were saying, Cameron was saying, and yourself, that with regards to that juxtaposition between this sympathetic and parasympathetic tone, so basically for the layman, states of arousal, often in sport and sometimes in life, you think that you've got to get charged up and you've got to get into this state of arousal to attack life or to attack the sport. I come from a combat sports background, and my interests are things like freediving and spearfishing and archery and shooting and these kind of things. In combat sports, there's a degree you're going to get aroused anyway. You're about to get into a bloody fight. Your physiology is on the line. My coach used to tell me, if you can perform in the ring or in the cage at 40% of what you can do in the gym, you're doing bloody well. You're doing really well. And what that means is, it means you're containing and controlling yourself and not overextending and not trying to hit too hard and jump too far and make these mistakes. So there's almost this balance. Of course, you need to be aroused, but in those moments in the corner, you're actually trying to bring your level down to stop yourself from making terrible decisions or overreaching and getting caught out. Sports like freediving, where you go down on one breath, or spearfishing, or any archery or shooting, it's totally the opposite to pretty much every other sport. The point is to actually bring your level down, and I think these are analogistic to life, like almost the rhythms throughout the day. So when I can't remember the name you use, but Sally's at work and the boss says, your deadline's due, and you get that adrenal dump and that shot of cortisol, your stress hormones go poof, in much the same manner as if she was Sally Jub Jub the cave woman, and she went into a cave and there was like physiologically inside that state of allostasis, sorry, your balance, your endocrinological balance has just shifted in much the same way owing to perception. And the idea of consciously controlling that, I think is absolutely fantastic and empowering. So I guess these aren't questions; they're more observations of my own personal distillations of what you're saying, Steve. And I just think it's such a powerful tool to be aware and to almost standardize it and to know what is happening internally as a response to external stimuli. And it's at this point, I don't want to sort of sound like a smart ass or take over, but I think we, just for the guys that are listening, we use words every day in life and they can have a multitude of concepts, contexts. And so one of the ones to help understand conversations like this is this old Hans Selye breakdown of the word stress, because we use stress in normally biologically, but sort of 3 different ways. And so we can talk about stress like a stressor, which is something that happens to you. So say it got really cold or really hot, that's the stressor. That's stress, one term we use stress. Another term that we use stress will be stress response. What physiologically happens in me to deal with it? So anything that changes my physiological state is a stressor. Any way I respond to it is also called stress. And then we use it in a third way, and that is the pathogenic effects of the stress response happening again and again and again and again and again and again.
The chronic side.
It's the chronic side, and that's when you say, Cameron, you don't look well slept. You're stressed, or whatever. And I think for anybody listening, when you have a system in your mind that can make these things, it doesn't simplify, but it keeps it simple for you to understand. You start taking back control. And so not only do you have a perception now, but you also have techniques from guys like Steve. So you go, oh, I know what's going on. And that can be even more stressful. It's like, oh, these things are happening to my body. How do I deal with them? And I think that's the great power of just examining life and the world and your perceptions of it and bringing it down. So I guess what I'm doing is I'm giving you a verbal line of my thoughts as I think you get a stream of consciousness here. So I'm trying to break down lessons that I can take away.
We call this a brain dump.
That's awesome, yeah.
You're bringing it out. And I want to add one word to what you're saying, because I absolutely love your energy, your fire, your passion in this right now. I just love it. But you mentioned a word times. You kept saying bringing it down. And I want to bring a different word into context, and it's harness. It's not about necessarily bringing down the energy or bringing down. It's about harnessing that energy. And you did nail a word that I love, and it's control. Breath control. This is the difference between conscious breathing and unconscious breathing. And so there's a time that you want to increase your breathing. You want to build up that flame when you're getting ready to go into like a very high intense situation, or not really go into the situation, to be able to thrive in that situation. But then there's the point where it goes too far and you start, that flame it burns you. And this is bad. So when you learn that there's a time to increase your breathing, and that's okay, but you need to make sure that you bring it back down so your body can restore. And this comes from a different breathing. Okay, what about that space in between? Okay, well, there's a breathing rhythm for that as well. So I think you nailed it on the head when you said, really, kind of the sky is the limit, and the opportunities and potential is endless. But all you have to do is figure out the different breathing rhythms and methods, and then tune it to the environment that you're in. Most people are a product of their external environment. And when you do this, you are giving all of your freaking power away. And this is most people in the world. And guys, you're not doing anything wrong. We're not taught these things. but you're giving your power away. When you start to focus on your breathing, this thing that runs on autopilot, and when you take conscious awareness, it's one of the only things that we have as humans that runs on autopilot, but also we can adjust and control it consciously, which is quite phenomenal. It's a miracle, really. And when you bring that control to your breath, you'll be just absolutely amazed how you can change the effects, not only before you go into the situation, but during and after, just by changing the way that you breathe. It's all about breath control. So I love what you brought up, brother.
Awesome, Steve.
Yes.
Yeah.
I could do this all day with you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's also a great point, Steve, that you mentioned there. That is one of the reasons why this is, inarguably, in my opinion, the most effective tool at switching between those autonomic nervous states, because it's the only way in which we're able to control an involuntary bodily function through voluntary movement. And that's why we're able to bridge the gap so quickly and efficiently with breath. Obviously, with a bit of practice, and I say this in almost everything I talk about, every modality, every, mindfulness, meditation, breath work, going to the, fitness in general, any sports discipline, they're all practices that we all get more efficient with them over time, But yeah, once you've mastered it, then it, without doubt, is one of the most effective tools, and that is pretty much the reason there that you mentioned just then. And between you two, you kind of led me on to something that I was hoping we would cover as well, which is kind of getting into flow. Because Gaz, you were talking about how, the misnomer in sport that you always want to be charged up, you always want to be kind of fired up before you go into a fight, as an example, but also we see, probably powerlifting is a really good example. You see guys getting kind of slapped around by their coaches and sniffing the salts before they charge in and go for the deadlift PB or what have you. And that's a really interesting one that you're talking about, how actually, maintaining that control is important. And Stevie used a great word, that harness. You're actually trying to harness, the ability to control that environment. You're harnessing the energy in a way that you can still deliver it, but that you're doing it in the way that's most effective. And essentially what we're kind of starting to talk about now is accessing that flow state, where you're in the zone. For anyone who doesn't know, who's listening to this, we're talking about flow state, which is that feeling when you tune into an activity that you're doing, and that you are able to encompass that feeling that you can do it effortlessly, that you're enjoying every moment. You feel like you can do it forever, and you're just doing it perfectly. And this is this is a state that we often hear about in sports, in art, like music production. Running is a very common one where people experience flow state, but also doing tasks at work. If you're even in a meeting like this, or on a call with you're a sales guy on a call with a prospect, and it's just the words are flowing out of your mouth, and you're saying all the right things, and the guys, you can already feel him reaching for his wallet. That's that flow state where it's all just going perfectly well. But you can't access that state when you're stressed, when you're feeling negative stress. Like when you're positive stress, yes. But when negative stress is getting the better of you, you're never going to access that flow state. And this ties in with, even though flow state is something that probably not that many people are actively trying to access on a daily basis, pretty much all of our poor behavioral reasoning comes from a lack of emotional self-control. And so if you're using breath work to kind of harness your ability to handle that, you're also giving yourself the opportunity to start accessing this flow state in more of the things that you're doing. And so performance is just, it's like an exponential, curve, because you're starting with just that emotional self-control, which is mitigating the chances of making poor decisions, whether it's, not being motivated to do the exercise you should be doing, or not being motivated to do a good enough job at work, or making poor dietary choices when you should be managing your diet to lose weight, whatever it might be. It starts with that, but then the principles that you've applied in order to successfully achieve that can then be used to skyrocket your performance in everything else that you do. And this, for me, is why this is such an awesome, exciting thing to be able to learn about and understand and then harness, as you put it.
Well
I went a
said.
bit sideways with my point there. I'm not sure if that was where I wanted to end up, but
No, you gave me chills, I think 3 different times. So whatever, okay, anyone that's watching, that was a flow state. That was pure passion, excitement, and flow. And I love that you talk about that, man, because I'm an advocate for flow state. And that's the thing. It's the same thing, guys. We're just like a car. We're just like a car. If we don't have good oil, if the car's not running efficiently and well, and it's going to start to break down. And stressors, or a stress response, it's having your foot on the gas pedal and your foot on the brake pedal at the same time, and it's going to break down. It's going to start to chuggle up, you know. And so when you can use these methods, you're doing exactly what you said, Cameron. I just absolutely love that. We want the infamous flow state that everyone wonders about. The thing is that we're taught to push, to go farther, go faster, go harder, push, get it done, get to the top. It doesn't matter what it takes. No, that's burnout. That's burnout. When has anyone ever made a really good, proper decision when you're pissed off, you're stressed out, you're sad, you're frustrated? No, I say take a step back and tune into your breath, and your breath will balance the functions of your body, your physiology, everything. When everything's working together, and your thoughts are going to be clear because you have coherent breathing. So you're going to have coherent thoughts. Now you're tapping into your endocrine system, and these breathing methods are going to start to release feel-good hormones. So now you're almost, in a sense, manufacturing your own happiness. So you're clearing up your thoughts, you're optimizing your physiology, and you're tapping into literally the hormones and the transmitters that make you feel good. That is the infamous flow state. Now you mix in fitness, good eating, nutrition, other things like that. Guys, I'm telling you that you'll be unstoppable. This is how the ancient rishis and the ancient Himalayan yogis and the shamans, this is why they were said to be able to be immortal. They were living for well over 100 years. They were optimized mental, physical, and emotional health. That is flow state. And I'm so glad you made a little left turn there, Cameron, because you just touched it. I think that's why I got chills, because I love that word, flow state. I love it. Anyway, okay, I'll pull back. Oh, man.
yeah, I mean, this could just go in so many directions. I'm conscious that I don't know how much more time you've got, Steve, this round, but we can for sure. I love the idea that you mentioned earlier. I was thinking the same thing. You have to talk about your telekinetic powers as well, because you read my mind when you said maybe we can do like a series and have another couple of rounds on this, because it's just too big a subject to get into any real specifics in go, I think.
And if we go off on too many tangents, and it'll lose its clarity. So let's let this soak in for everyone. This was huge. You guys, let's schedule this again. We'll go into a different topic, you know, whether that's more of the mental side, the emotional side, whatever it might be. But I would love you guys and any of these followers, because this was a powerful conversation. You guys are really, really smart, and I can tell very, very good at what you do. Cameron, I know you, and I know your background. So, but you know, I'm sorry. What is it, Gary?
Yeah.
Gareth.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just feel like you guys are well diverse in what you do. So it's been a pleasure chatting with you guys.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, definitely.
Really informative. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was looking forward to having you, Steve, just because I know you're so passionate about this, and you are one of the few people that I've come across that can readily back this stuff up with, you know, the science-based stuff, the evidence-based stuff as well, which is what really people need convincing, because it's really important. You know, it's critical to health, this stuff. And they do need that bit of extra reassurance, and it's not enough just to ask people to put their faith in, you know, 1,000-year-old practices without kind of having more than a woolly explanation as to why it works. So, yeah, it's been awesome having you on, mate. Really, really happy about that. Gaz, you want to got any notes to part on there? Any questions that you've been keeping in your back pocket?
Yeah. You know what? Maybe if we do it again, maybe as a premise, for the next talk, or maybe like something to open it up with my kind of students and followers when people come on the fitness retreats and even on the safaris and things like that. There's a fitness bent to it. We often think of health and wellness in three different factors, and we think of diet, movement and exercise, and lifestyle. And my big thing is lifestyle supersedes diet. Lifestyle is at the top of that hierarchy, even with movement, because lifestyle, if we want to put it in the scientific sense, is basically hormonal management, is the basis of this, which is much of the same as what Steve's saying in terms of the breathing. Breathing is a technique to adjust your physiological state, your emotional state. Your emotional state affects your physiological state, vice versa. And in that sense, lifestyle supersedes everything. I'm calling it lifestyle. And you could eat the most amazing diet, but your nutrient uptake will be absolutely dictated by your emotional state, which affects your physiological state. Same with your physical training. That is the stressor, but the time in which you adapt and do what we call in sports science to compensate is affected by your rest. And when I say rest, I mean it as a physiological state that you get into, not just stop what you're doing. Because I can stop what I'm doing that's physically a stressor, but still have many mental stressors, which stop me from getting into parasympathetic rest and digest, feed and breathe, whatever you want to call the state, and which stops me from building and building upon it. So you often find that there's these people who do everything wrong. They do the wrong exercises and they eat the wrong diet, and yet they're lean and healthy. And when you meet these people, they're also very happy people, or at least contented and balanced in themselves. And on that note, I think that would be a great thing to start on, just as a premise, to talk about how does lifestyle supersede diet? How does lifestyle supersede movement and exercise? Because for me, it's at the top of the tree. And for so long, it was seen as this wishy-washy, esoteric, psychology-based thing, where actually we now have hard and measurable evidence that if you say you're in a particular mood and you're being honest, there's very tangible, readable, quantifiable and qualifiable results that we can take from it, from whether it's brain scan and blood work and how you even just heal. So I'd love for us to sort of end on that note. If people were to go like, oh shit, lifestyle supersedes everything. And then if perhaps, because we've already talked about doing this again, that would be the premise. How does lifestyle supersede diet and exercise?
Man.
Love it.
Challenge accepted.
Love it.
I do too.
Awesome.
Man. That's awesome.
Yeah. Great idea, Gaz. Mega keen for that. So, in that case, Steve, let people know where they can find you, where you're at, if they want to check you out and see what else you're up to.
Yeah,
and then we'll
it's
call
actually it's super easy. It's breathewithsteve.com. So Stephen Whitney or Breathe with Steve on Facebook, Instagram, or my website, breathewithsteve.com. And I have a 4-week stress less breathwork program where I teach you how to biohack your nervous system, how to optimize the physiology to bring you into this emphasis flow state to reach that peak performance. And it's a very pragmatical approach. So anyone that's just wanting to start somewhere, this is a great way to start. And if you have any information or need to gather any information, check out my website. Feel free to reach out to me. I'm all about community, and I love chatting with people and sharing information. And so I truly believe community is the cure. And I feel very warm and welcome to be a part of yours. And you guys are always more than welcome to be a part of mine. And that's what makes lifestyle make it that much sweeter.
Cool.
Awesome. Good stuff. Yeah, top man. That's great. You're definitely part of the Theseus Body and Mind Legion now, Steve. So we'll see you here again. Have an awesome day.
Awesome. Guys, thank you again so much. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to chatting with all of you. I have a feeling very, very soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Well, have a great day, guys. Anyone who's watching who hasn't already downloaded the Fitter Body, Stronger Mind ebook, which is available for free, all the essentials on how to develop awesome fitness and a resilient mindset, make sure you follow the link somewhere in the description or the comments here to get a copy of that. And we will see you for another episode of this very soon. Awesome work, guys. Catch you later.
See you guys.